excited to chat with him. He has been in the community for a handful of years now, and he's making quite an impact, especially with the youth in our community. I want to kind of take a look at a lot of trends that we see happening in the community. One of the trends I want to ask this gentleman about is some of the shootings that have been happening here. I also want to talk about a podcast that he has that is making quite an impact from a mental health standpoint. I think one of the elements that should be prioritized perhaps more now is the impact of mental health or lack thereof during this time we call COVID. So much of our time has been spent in quarantine and away from human connection, and perhaps that lack of human connection and face-to-face interaction is impacting us from a mental health standpoint more than we actually realize. So a lot to cover on the show. We'll also talk the University of Virginia, returning to what the president says is essentially normal in the fall, and the impact that could have on the community. I think it's positive. I certainly hope, Daniel.
I hope so.
I think by the fall we're all going to be, we hope, knock on wood, the vaccinations will be ubiquitous and extremely widely in our arms, and that could help the community should help the community from a health standpoint. So a lot we're going to cover today on the show. Judah Wickower, we can start this program when you are ready, sir. Good Monday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille show. Thank you kindly for joining us. We love connecting with you through this platform. Of course, we're live in Charlottesville, Central Virginia, across the Commonwealth and the country on the I Love CVille network. We're presented and powered by Ting, Crazy Fast Internet. The best internet in the community powers this network. A lot we're going to cover on this show. Judah Wickower, of course, is our director. In a matter of moments, you'll see Daniel Fairley on this set. This gentleman, a leader in this community. I hear from, frankly, quite a few people about this man. And I will embarrass him a little bit because a lot of people in this community are singing his praises, especially the positive impact he's having with youth in the city of Charlottesville, the next generation of leaders. A couple of items I need to get out of the notebook first before we welcome Daniel to the show. Tomorrow is an opportunity that I really want you guys to put on your calendar. We have the candidates that are running for Charlottesville Council, all of them but one here in the studio. This is 2 hours for you to get to know them before you head to the voting booth. The Democratic primary is June 8th. The general election is in early June. It's going to be really cool tomorrow because former councilor Kathy Galvin is going to be on the show, and she's going to be asking the questions of the candidates. So instead of me, we're going to have someone who spent 2 terms on the dais in the trenches asking the questions that matter to the people that could get elected onto the dais. It's 12:30 tomorrow. Carl Brown, Juan Diego Wade, Brian Pinkston, and Yaz Washington all in studio. NBC 29 is going to be here to cover it. So will the Daily Progress in Charlottesville tomorrow. We have 4 of the 5 candidates. We did extend an invitation to Mayor Nikaya Walker. We have not heard back from her about joining us for the candidate forum. I wanted to be clear about that. The invitation was extended to Mayor Nikaya Walker. 12:30 tomorrow here on the I Love CVille network with former councilor Kathy Galvin moderating the discussion for 2 hours with the sole purpose of bringing knowledge and education to you on these devices, which, frankly speaking, I check this thing like 150 times a day. I mean, it is an addiction. Let's cut to the chase here. Judah Wickhauer, if we could, go to the studio camera and welcome the dapper Daniel Fairley to the show. How are you?
I'm doing real well, especially being complimented like that.
Hey, I've heard, I sincerely mean this. I've heard from teachers, from administrators, from principals, from leaders in the community, about you and folks singing your praises. You've been in the community a handful of years, and you've already made a hugely tremendous impact. Before we get to headlines, before we get to the podcast, before we get to your work, how about an introduction to you for everyone that's watching?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm Daniel Fairley. I'm a youth opportunity coordinator focused on Black male achievement inside the city of Charlottesville. A lot of my work is both done programmatically as well as systemically. I do work with Lighthouse Studios and partnerships with Clarence Green and other places to kind of create documentaries focused on Black men and their experiences. I've also, again, as we mentioned before, launched a podcast focused on Black mental health in our community. President of the 100 Black Men, on a couple different boards. It's just trying to make the community better. It's really what I focus on.
This guy, a bona fide leader in the community who understands the concept of digital and multimedia to get positivity and connection to folks that need it. And frankly, all of us need it coming out of COVID. All right, let's talk first a couple of headlines. UVA and President Ryan, the fall, really looking like it's going to be like business as usual for this university. Yeah. In-person classes, students living in residence halls or on grounds, hybrid, more of a backseat, and this more of the priority. What'd you make of that?
I mean, honestly, I think that it's, if done well, right, I think that would really benefit both the students and their learning experiences, as well as, I mean, there's a lot of businesses in town that depend on students. So I think that that could be really good. But we've also seen it done not well, right? We've seen it when students were able to rush fraternity and sororities, and then, I mean, just hundreds of students gathering during the middle of a pandemic. I think that there are good ways to do it, and then there are ways in which it can impact the community really poorly.
You've been vaccinated.
Yes.
How was that process for you? Any fear with the vaccine at all?
I mean, honestly, it was fear, not so much of myself, but kind of like knowing the historical, right? Knowing the history of vaccines, knowing the Tuskegee experiment, knowing how Black people have been treated in vaccinations and kind of being guinea pigs. But that all subsided when I think about this is the best information that we have, right? So if we're able to do everything we can to help out the community and everything we can to look out for our fellow people, then I need to do that, right? If I have the immense privilege of being vaccinated and being considered 1A priority even as a 29-year-old, that's something that I need to take advantage of and not kind of scoff at or wonder, is something fishy going to happen? I think that we should trust the scientists. We should trust the people that are our leaders in our community. And so I was initially nervous just because, vaccines in general, you never really know what you're getting. So I did a lot of research going into it. But honestly, I went with my friend, actually my co-host, John Thompson, and I went together. It was a bit of a process. We had to drive down to Richmond, and there's a whole bunch of other things as far as we were in the initial part of vaccine distribution in January and February.
Wow.
So yeah, but it's gotten a lot better, right? So I've taken my dad to go get his vaccine. He got Johnson & Johnson, and that was very in and out, very quick, very easy, and he didn't have any side effects. So I think that there's a lot that's good that's happening for sure.
Let me ask this. How old's your father?
So he is 55, but he has a disability. He had a stroke and is disabled on his right side.
Okay, so the mindset that you had toward the vaccine as a 29-year-old and the mindset your father as a 55-year-old, how was it similar and how was it different?
Yeah, I think that, so my father actually, he was a Marine, worked in the Pentagon, very, very involved in federal government stuff, right? So it was always understanding the benefits of government that could have.
So he had confidence in
He
it.
did, yeah,
Okay,
he did.
okay.
I think that, and I also have like family members that were less confident, right? Family members that said, you know what, I'm gonna wait, maybe a couple of months, see what happens with the vaccine, see if there's any side effects that come about it with large scale production. But once he did that, he said, you know what, and we saw him this weekend. He said he got the vaccine. Johnson & Johnson was my uncle. He was a little bit skeptical, but he got it and he was totally fine. I think it's kind of the initial hesitation, right? The initial we've never seen anything like this. We never lived through anything like this where we had to have mass vaccination because of one virus, right? So I think that it's something that's new. But when you have, again, modern science that is just out of this world, people that are trying to do the best for the community, and you're soliciting, you're giving your body and yourself to say, I'm doing what we as a collective believe is best.
Was your uncle's skepticism tied to the history of how African Americans have been treated with innovation in medicine, or was it tied to the skepticism of, good night, we've never been in a pandemic before?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both, but definitely understanding, again, the history of it all, right? Like understanding that we as Black people have not been treated well, right, in government mandated things. And so understanding that that's going to be a part of it. And I think that there's something to be said for being the first, right? Being some of the initial people.
Sure.
Because right now, even though, again, I'm vaccinated, but only about a third of the country has at least one shot, right? And that's not very many people if you're thinking about a country as large as ours. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really the understanding that there's so much nuance and there's new vaccines that are being developed, and then you have AstraZeneca, right? And there were some problems with that. And then come to find out it wasn't as a big of a problem as maybe we had thought before, but then there's numbers that there's hiding. It's there's so many questions and you just kind of are wondering what's really going on. It's confusing, yeah, for sure.
How did your mindset change once you got vaccinated? Did you feel immediately super confident to go? Because you clearly, you spend 5 minutes with this guy, you clearly love to be around people.
Yeah.
You crave human connection like I do.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was most difficult about doing this podcast over 2020 was so much of it was done virtually via Skype. And one of the reasons I launched the podcast to begin with was to do this, to get to know the Daniel Fairleys of the world, right? And spend 30 minutes with folks that are awesome and leaders and making an impact. And when you're doing it over this darn computer screen, it's just not nearly the same. So I'm curious of your mindset from a confidence standpoint, from being around people, from going to restaurants or all the above.
Right. It was and still is developing, right?
Okay.
I think that even as I came in, I was kind of hesitant, I'm gonna wear my mask, make sure everyone knows, by the way, I'm vaccinated. And it's kind of this hesitancy of it's such a privilege to be vaccinated and there's skepticism, right? And so it's saying you're vaccinated means you believe in science, you believe in these kind of things, saying that you're gonna be protected. And I think there's obviously political implications that have somehow been spurred up by this, right? It's incredible to think that the health of our country and what we can do best has been somehow politicized.
This mask concept has been so politicized, and it's been so incredibly unfortunate.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's been such a detriment into trying to get us moving past the pandemic, right? And kind of believing that we're past the pandemic, even when there's still work to do.
Sure.
Honestly, I link it to colorblindness and things like that, where you're saying, okay, we're in racism, right? We're in a broken country and a broken system, but you have people that are saying, no, the system's not broken. No, we're fine. No, we're past this. We're in a post-racial society. But really, there's work to be done, right? And I think that's what the mask kind of symbolized to me is we're still in it, right? There's still work that we need to do on an individual level to look out for the collective. But if you're only looking out for yourself, then that's going to harm the collective.
Sure, very well said. Good night. Let me throw this to you. Youth that you're working alongside, that you're mentoring. How, and this is a broad stroke question, maybe you can give an example without naming names or go with the broad stroke approach, the macro approach. How is our next generation of leaders embracing, ignoring, considering this vaccine, the pandemic, mask, and how we get to I guess, herd immunity in a healthy country.
Right, right. I mean, the kids that I've spoken with, I mean, all of it has been either virtually or I kind of see them, as they're riding their bikes around. But the kids that I've spoken with have been kind of like, they just want to get back to school. They just want to work with their friends. They want to hang out with people again. And I think that especially as kids are developing and as kids are going through some of the really most influential parts of their lives, right? The kind of the development that you're learning about interacting with people on every different scale, whether it is 1 and 2 year olds that have never interacted with another kid before, or maybe they're only their brother or their sister, or you have kids that are in their developmental stages. We're going to have students that are going to CHS that spent half a year at Buford, right? They're going to be going almost straight from Walker Upper Elementary to high school. And you have that entire developmental experience being virtual. I think that the kids that I work with and the kids that I've talked to have just said I just want to feel normal again, right? I just want to feel like I can connect with people again, in their own way, right? I'm kind of giving them the ways that they speak is more like, this sucks. I hate this. I just want to go see my friends. But I think that that's really been a big part of it is trying to make sure that the kids are connected in ways that they can, because sure, we were saying, the kids have, they're making friends on Fortnite, right? There's multinational, multi-generational friendships that are forming because they play on the same 2K team together, right? There's things that they were able to do, but they also knew that they loved and they needed that connection with their fellow classmates and with their fellow people, working really closely. I think that that's now missing, right? And so they leaned on that, and it was fun in the beginning, but they're ready to get back just like we are.
Robert Van Norden, give you some serious props here on the show.
Yeah, that's my dad.
Geronda, hello. Geronda Shante Hill, giving you props as well. The cool aspect of the show is you can give Daniel questions, you can share perspective, you can help dictate the pace and tempo of the conversation by putting your thoughts in the comment section, and I will relay them on air. Please abide by the golden rule. It's okay if you disagree with us, but only comments that are respectful will be relayed on the show. E. Lee Dyer IV, welcome to the program. You have 3 states watching you, some friends from Stafford watching you as well on the program. Is this... Here's a tough question.
Okay.
Is a relationship, friendship, a friendship? Is a friendship that's developed and built digitally, like on Fortnite, or through some of these gaming platforms? How do you characterize those when mentoring youth?
So there's a concept called parallel play, right?
Okay.
It's the idea that you and I, even though we're sitting here looking at each other across from each other, a lot of times, especially kids that are in developmental stages, early on, 11, 12, 13, they're not going to want to do this, right? They're not going to want to sit here and stare into someone's eyes and say oh, these are my deepest, darkest secrets. Okay. What they would rather do, and I've done with I've been a big brother, my little brother moved, but I've been a big brother before, I'm a big mentor. What I do with these kids, I'll take them fishing, we'll play video games together, but basically it's the idea of even just going on a walk where you two can be parallel focused on something else and yet talking to each other, right? And so I think that this is parallel play, but digitally, right? So you and some person that you may have just met or some kid that's across line, you can say oh, we're working together on, defeating this level, defeating this boss. And you're able to share with them some things that just like you do on social media with people you may not know as well, you're able to get a little bit deeper, almost because it's you don't really, really know them. And they're not going to be at your school tomorrow talking junk about you, saying, you know what I mean? Oh, you really sucked at Fortnite last night or whatever. You can share with them some of the things you may not be able to share with some of your friends because it's a little bit too intimate of an experience.
Sure.
And so I think that the digital parallel play that students are able to experience by working with each other, but also working on a shared goal and a shared task, as opposed to trying to be really intimate, be really direct, right? We're so, especially as men, we're not taught to do that very well.
Sure.
And I think that this gives an opportunity that I don't think we've seen before.
Interesting.
Where kids are able to do that. Yeah.
So you see an aspect of this as very positive.
I do. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's what I've realized is that when I'm working with kids, there are things that they do, right, that we have to understand the positive in it. We have to understand that, like, that may not be the way that I would have done it. That looks different than how I experienced the world when I was your age. But let's hear what you have to say, right? I'm making videos, I'm making documentaries, I'm trying to get kids experiences and interviewing people. But also, like, they love making TikTok videos. And I remember initially thinking, oh, TikTok is just Vine, like, it's not, like, I don't really care about it. And then my therapist sent me a TikTok, and she was like, look at this TikTok. I know it's weird, but, like, check this out, because it's about actually mental health, and it's actually about focusing on parts of your body and understanding yourself. And it's like a guided meditation through TikTok. And it's something that was like very short, about 30 seconds, but like I would have never have seen that had it not been for a short video platform like TikTok.
I respect what you just said, especially the highlight of working with the therapist. I feel like in 2021, we still have to like demystify or destigmatize that therapy is absolutely 100% the way to go, right?
Absolutely.
And how you presented it, it wasn't even like a hesitation. It was just, and walk me through that. Walk me through that, and how, like, especially for men, especially for like dudes that like alpha dudes, and this is going to lead us to some of the trends we're seeing in Charlottesville. Like alpha dudes, the last thing we want to admit to somebody is like we're seeking counsel about intimacy, about maybe self-worth, about insecurities. Because we want to give this perception to the community that we got this no matter what. Anywhere you want to go on that topic.
We can't even ask for directions without feeling insecure, right? So to think that we're going to ask for directions or ask for kind of understandings of ourselves or understandings of deep trauma that we've had and experienced in our past, I think it's ludicrous given like the kind of scenario or the upbringing that we've had. We are taught so deeply and so strongly to run away from emotion, right? If it's not anger, then like you can't have it, right? Or if it's joy, then it needs to be like joy from defeating someone else, right? I think that it's so incredible to think of the ways in which we've been socialized and traumatized and really taken out of ourselves and out of our feelings to where, I mean, like, my experiences in going to therapy started when I had no other choice, right? I had lost a family member that was really close to me, and I realized that like I was in Vermont and I had no connections. I was up there, I'm from Virginia, I went to University of Richmond for undergrad, and then I went to Vermont for grad school, and I was like, one, it was white, snow, people, everything. It was just, all of it was white.
Freezing cold?
Yeah, very cold, wind like you never believed it, and I was so disconnected from my community, and then I had lost someone, and I couldn't run back down to go see them very quickly, right? And so I think the ideas of like, I was so disconnected, and I had to get to my breaking point before I even went to go see a therapist. And then while I was there, it also took me another, I'd say almost like 6 months before I admitted that I had depression. It was something that like
did you know?
I knew, but I didn't want to admit it to myself.
Okay.
I thought that depression was like something that you can't get out of bed, which happens sometimes, but like you couldn't get out of bed, you were suicidal, there was nothing to live for. That's what I thought that depression was.
Sure, and it was probably difficult because University of Richmond undergrad, I mean, this is the best of the best who are going to this school. So at this point, you've probably had won or had success in every aspect of your life.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, I spoke at my graduation, like I was really well known and really on like the top of my class when I'm thinking about things that I did, especially outside the classroom, working with student organizations. Like it was, and then in grad school, I even did that when I was there as well. And so I kind of had a lot of external success, right? A lot of external things where, I could end in a 4.0 GPA in grad school. I could get the highest honors. I could do all these things. I worked in the White House.
So the perception is.
Right. Daniel's fine. A big smile, like he's totally fine. What would he have anything to be sad about? But I think that it was realizing that like I had these deep hurts inside of me, right? And there were things that I wasn't ready to deal with, and I wasn't ready to kind of admit because it would feel like I had failed, right? I had succeeded in so many things, but internally I felt like a failure. Internally I felt like I don't even know my emotions. I don't know myself. And that was something that I really had to come to grips with. And then once I started seeing a therapist, once I started understanding myself a little bit more, understanding trauma that I experienced or ways in which I wasn't prepared for the world, then I started honestly becoming a healthier person. Yeah.
3 semesters in to this virtual hybrid learning for students. What are you seeing here? What are you seeing from the children? What are you seeing from the students?
I mean, I'm seeing pain and hunger and want, right? I'm seeing students that want and thrive on that connection. Sure, I love connection. I love, being with students. I honestly, if there was any time in my life that I could endure a pandemic with very little scathing, it would be right now.
Right, 29-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 29, just got engaged. I'm feeling good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Things are going really well. I have a good job. I love the work that I do. If I was in Vermont, if I was, an undergraduate student trying to figure out myself and my own experiences, if I was as young as the kids that I'm working with between their middle school years or even in high school.
How about the parents with 3 kids at home that have to work jobs to keep food on the table?
I can't tell you how many, honestly, women that I've heard from that have said, I had to quit my job. I had to stop working. I could not do what I was expected to do. And I'm going to go back and sure, I may do part-time or whatever, but there was not enough time and space for me to do both my full job and to do the work that I needed for my kids to then be a full-time teacher and to be a full-time parent and to feed them snacks every day. And that's all expected. That's just expected of women, right? And I think that that's something that, again, it's a toll in our society where we have these unrealistic expectations of these people, and only of half of our population.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
How about this? One of the things we have real talk, stuff that perhaps even makes folks uncomfortable on this show, and we do it in a way that is, we try to be approachable here.
Right.
One of the things I'm fearful of is we have maybe 17 private schools in this area. So many, and you know this better than me, so many of these private schools, their students are they've learned in the classroom throughout this entire pandemic. So the students whose parents have means or money, they are learning on grade level as they would before it was the pandemic. So many of the students that are in our public school system that maybe do not have the means or this luxury had the script completely flipped.
Right.
What is the macro and micro impact of this? Do we even know yet what's going to happen?
I don't think that we know yet because,
Okay.
there are a lot of different ways. We see it even so I've done a couple different surveys with students and kind of working to understand this very strange dynamic that happens in middle school, right? A lot of times students, especially ones that come from Venable, Burley Moran, places like that, right? They'll go through their elementary school here inside the city, they'll be fine, 1st through 4th grade, and then they'll take the students out, right? Put them in the village school, Stab, Covenant, you name it, right? They'll take 4 years, have that private school experience, and then go back into CHS, right? It's something that happens. Actually, the youth counselor that I'm working with is trying to understand this dynamic.
Why does that
talking
happen?
with students? Well, I think it's a couple of different reasons. One, I'm glad to see that they just hired VMDO to do the redesigning of the middle schools.
Sure.
I'm glad to see that because as I mentioned before, it's really, really hard to get your foot inside of understanding that during some of the most difficult hormone-ridden times of your life, you are in one school, you're just getting used to it, and you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out for 4 years, right? During some of the 4 hardest years that you're gonna experience. And to not have either, what I did and what most schools do, 1st through 5th grade, one school, 6th through 8th grade in another school, and then 9th through 12th grade inside of another school. When you have the program split up like that, when you have students' experiences where they don't feel that connection, they don't feel they don't feel oh, I am a Johnson Jaguar, right? That is my identity. When they don't feel that identity, they don't feel that connection, then you don't have the opportunities to then connect with your teachers, to connect with the principal that now knows you and saw you go through a growth spurt, right? You don't have those experiences, and I just kind of see that is just like one of the hardest things that I've with the kids that I work with, right? So I'm excited to see that there's changes that are coming. I'm excited to see that they are trying to figure out a way to really embrace and change what's going to happen as far as like where the schools are going. But the kids that I'm working with are really looking forward to getting back into school.
You got props coming in. John Kelly has given you some props. Nice. I'm going to read his comment here in a matter of moments. If you have some perspective you'd like to share with Daniel, just put it in the feed here. What is the middle school period from your time working with students? Is that the most challenging time?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, especially here in Charlottesville, again, because you have like students that are so disconnected, and when throw in a pandemic, right? There, like I said before, there's going to be kids that went from upper elementary school that are now going to CHS where they had hardly any like middle school experience, and I think that like I'm really looking forward to the day in which we can move towards a grouping of middle school where students are able to come together and just be a part of that, because we see the benefits of it, right? We see that there are kids that are coming out of places like the Village School where they're able to take 4 years of Latin, and then when I met with an AP Latin class inside of CHS and just kind of asked them some questions about their experiences, every single one of them were from the Village School. And you have students where they say that like, you know, I went to middle school outside of CHS because my parents didn't want me to break up my time in that same way. I think that like it's definitely a hard time to really both get your footing as far as like, you know, who you are and understanding you can make some of your own decisions. You can choose some of your friends. You probably start breaking up friendships because not everyone, you know, is wanting to be around you. You don't want to be around everyone else. So I think that it's an important opportunity for us to really dive in, because it also is a time in which a lot of the services, whether it is Boys and Girls Club, kind of Head Start, like, you know, places where we're pumping a lot of effort into getting kids reading by grade level by 3rd grade. And then once you get past that, and once you start having them take SOLs, and then you start to see, again, their experiences, their engagement with you know, outside programming, they start getting involved in sports. Like, it's not so much the enrichment that we've seen inside of the elementary school time. So I think that like all those things come crashing into the same place, right? And then they also, I'll be honest, they stop being cute, right? They go from like 11 to 12 where they're like, oh, that's so nice, you're sassy, but you kind of like, you know, you're just joking or whatever, to kids that like, they're going through a lot, right? And they have like things that they're gonna say. And if you don't understand, if you don't speak teenager, right, then you're gonna be offended, you're gonna be hurt. I think that it takes a very special person to enjoy or to want to like work through and understand kind of some of those, like, you're not gonna have kids running up to you, giving you big hugs when they're 13, 14. They're gonna kind of like give you like a, what's up? You know, like it's not the same. So I think that like our society kind of sees them more as adults and kind of lets them go and says, oh, well, you're not as cute anymore. You go ahead and figure out your own thing.
How would you, a lot of places you can go with this one, how would you characterize in 2021 education in Charlottesville and our community goal of bridging educational gaps? Yeah. Long way to go. Have we made progress? How do you characterize it?
Well, I think that one of the things the pandemic has given us is a really great opportunity to rethink education, right? Rethink the ways in which we've seen our students either leaving the 5th through 8th grade experience and going to a private school, rethink the ways in which we've had students that were already privileged, already working with private tutors or kind of helping them, you know, get to where they needed to be. I think that it's in a reimagining stage. And so I'm really excited about different, whether it is like pipeline programs or other ways. Even Albemarle County actually just recently put out an RFP to say, hey, we're doing summer school, right? We have summer school available. We can do that from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then after that, we actually don't know what to do like with these kids, right? Like, we could create more stuff, but we know that they're going to be tired, especially going from Zoom school to then being in person for 4 hours a day. So can you as a community help create some programming to then fill in the gap between 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. or 12 p.m. and 5:30? Can you help us to really find a way that your students can then like be a part of, I run M Cubed, right? Like be a part of an M Cubed type of summer experience where they can learn math and learn about STEM experiences. Can they be a part of something like First Tee where they can learn about not just using golf, but also using the experiences outside of golf to learn about like how you play the game and how that relates to life skills. And I think that that is like a really brilliant way to try to incorporate some of the work that we're doing as youth serving organizations and as youth serving providers to then integrate that inside of the school system, right? If we have students that are coming, let's say they're leaving from school, they're having a bad day, they're going to the Boys and Girls Club, if we can connect those threads and we can call someone at the Boys and Girls Club and say, hey, David, like this kid's having a bad day, you know, they got into a fight in my class, I just want to let you know that when they get to your place because they may be thinking through some things.
Troy Robinson, giving you props. This is a very intelligent man. John Kelly, so glad to tune in and see my friend Daniel Fairley. Charlottesville is lucky to have him. So much of the conversation has been student-based, and it should be, but I think much of the conversation should start including the mental health, the mindset of the educators.
Yeah.
So why don't I ask you, and then some of your peers perhaps that you've heard or talked to, how's your mental health been through COVID? Yeah. And can you put into perspective some of the trials and tribulations that teachers have been feeling?
Absolutely. So like for me, I mean, this is part of the reason why we even started the How You podcast, right? Understanding that myself and John, right, we were friends before the pandemic, but really like we started getting involved and started to work out with each other because we were like, look, we work together, but like we need each other. We need to find some things where we can start being more connected just outside of work. So John worked for the city of Charlottesville. I myself also work for the city of Charlottesville. And we started working out together. We started kind of getting to know each other a little bit more. And I started checking in with him because it was like, I know that his family's in South Carolina and my family's in Northern Virginia. And so we didn't really have the family center that was here. And so we started to become each other's family. We started to be part of each other's bubble. And that was because like, a lot of the work and a lot of the pride and the joy that I feel is through working with the kids, is seeing them grow up, is seeing them use some of the experiences that we've taught them and apply it in a way that like they're influencing their peers now. Sure. There was a student one time, I remember, we started having an MP3 program, which is Men Passionately Pursuing Their Purpose. That was a program with Dr. Paul Harris, working with a lot of times student athletes and trying to get them to use some of their skills that they use on the field to then be a part of, like if you can read a defense, how can you use that to then analyze a book and analyze some characters, right? So we started trying to create this program, or Paul created it, but really making sure that their students are getting more connected and understanding that. So during the first time, we're getting there together, we're meeting with the kids. There's a couple of kids, there's one specifically that's like a real big jokester. You can tell that he's class clown type of guy. And during that time, like someone had said something that was just kind of like silly, or like they didn't hear someone say like, what's your name or whatever. And he had called him like tarded. And he was like, oh, man, like, dude, you tarded. And I was like, what in the world does tarded mean? That is like, what, are you hard? I don't understand, like, it at all, like, what's going on? He's like, oh, like, you can't say the R word anymore, so we just say this instead. And I was like, oh my God, like, that's what you were saying? And then Paul, I use this to this day, he looked at him and he just starts busting out laughing. Paul's like, oh my gosh, no way. You're telling me that you're still using that? I used that when I was in middle school. And Paul is also about like 40, 50 years old.
Sure, I know Paul.
Yeah, he's like, oh man, I used that when I was in middle school. Like, what, you guys are still doing that? And that just slight, like, he was like, we'll get back to it, you know, whatever. But that slight correction, that like, wow, I can't believe you're still using that. Like, I used to think that was cool when I was in middle school. Never heard it again. Literally never heard it again. Students were like understood. You didn't have to like reprimand him and teach him about all the different ways in which the mental health and like mentally disabled community has been, you know, tarnished by, you know, this word or things like that. He was just kind of like, man, like, wow, I can't believe you're still doing that. And that, again, that's speaking teenager, right? That's speaking to these kids and talking about like, you can change the way that you're doing things, right? And so then to have the coolest kid in the room, right, hear that, accept that criticism and never use it again, meant that all the other kids weren't using it again, right? And that is like a moment of pride that you don't get to see on a Zoom call. You don't get to see those experiences of students and like kind of their lives changing or their personalities changing, or really the kind of like self-correction as they're trying to test the boundaries, right, of being inside of school, being out of school. Oh, you're black. I don't really see many black men inside of an education setting. So I think you're more of a big brother to me, right? And so they start kind of pushing your boundaries or testing you, start making fun of you or things like that. And you're like, look, I'm not your friend, right? Like I'm here to help you. I'm here to work with you. I believe in you. But like, I'm not I'm not one of your little friends, right? Yeah. And I think that like those experiences, I think have just been stripped away as we're trying to get involved in Zoom. And so I'd say that like the teachers and the educators that I've been working with, they've been hurting just as much as the kids. They've been hurting to want to help them, right? I also am on the board for Loaves and Fishes. Our numbers have skyrocketed at a food pantry to see how many people are out of work, how many people don't have the basic necessities, and also people that used to rely on the schools for breakfast, lunch, and probably some snacks are now having to like create and produce a lot of that food, right? Thankfully, the school system started getting more buses out to then work with kids and to give them food, but it's been really hard, you know, to be a part of that and to not have basic necessities. So I think that like when teachers see that, they see students that are falling behind, they see that students are in systems that that don't have the capacity like a private school does to separate them out. Tandem goes 1 week on, 1 week off, right? They don't have that. And I think that like the teachers that I've seen have really missed interaction with the students.
You brought up the fact that there are not many black men in education.
Yeah.
What's the pressure you feel because of that?
For me, it is, so I mentioned before about my dad, right? It's understanding that like, so I grew up, my parents got divorced when I was really little. So I have my dad and I have my dad. So my Robert Van Norden, that's my stepdad, but I also call him my dad. I'm Daniel Fairley II. There's Daniel Fairley.
Sure.
But I also had my grandfather, my uncle. I grew up in a military town with a lot of really powerful people. Like my neighbor was a 3-star general, and then my other neighbor was the head of the FBI SWAT team. Wow. There were nothing but really powerful, well-meaning, looking out for me type of men in my life. And I know for a fact that I would not be where I am today had it not been for those men. And that also means for me that what I am given, I need to give back, right? And so that means that I need to be there with these students, advocating for them in the boardroom and inside of the programs that I do. I need to be working with these kids. I need to come on shows like this and talk about the geniuses that I work with that may not be seen that way when they're in the classroom because they may be seen as just goofing off. But really, they may just be bored, right? They may be saying, like, there's more things that need to challenge me. I see my role and my position inside of this school and inside of really Charlottesville as a mentor and as an advocate for youth. And so for me, it's like, I know that just because I went from kindergarten all the way through my master's without ever having a black male teacher.
Really?
Never once had a black male teacher. And I mean, and that's, when you're thinking about college, there's
right.
a lot of school, there's a lot of different opportunities.
Right.
Never. I mean, I majored in psychology, I had a double minor in criminal justice and Arabic. In grad school, I was a master's in education, focused on higher education, student affairs, administration. Never had a black male teacher. And so that type of experience, I'm like, I know that there are people that I'm working with that may not have, right, positive black male role models in their lives. And if I can be that, even just for one session, even just for one program for this student, if I can be the big brother, if I can be the mentor, then like I need to make that sacrifice and do that, right? I need to sacrifice the things that I may enjoy or could rather do, like traveling or whatever, because I know that these kids need that. And I'm gonna do everything in my power to make sure that they have the same experiences that I had, or at least close to it.
Is that trend changing? I mean, I met you through Dr. Hairston.
Yep.
And Dr. Hairston is a champion of so many in education. I love Dr. Hairston. I love his son Brandon. I love Gwen. I love the entire family.
Yeah.
Is the trend changing?
I'm hoping so. So like even for me, like I'm looking to get my education doctorate at UVA to try to do more influence on the systemic level, right? Try to help create opportunities for kids that didn't have it. Kind of doing my job, but also learning about like the research aspect of it. But I think that like it's really, I'm hoping to see more black men in education. And I've seen it actually, I mean, whether it is, I can't remember his last name, but Dr. Chauncey, but also like Edward and a couple other people that work at UVA, Paul Harris.
We're going to miss Paul.
Yeah.
Paul and his wife at Penn State, right?
I think so, yeah. And so I think that like, having those experiences where I'm able to, again, have mentors like Paul, right? Or even like Cameron Webb, people that I can look up to. I know that like I am now in that stopgap in between, right? So if I'm looking to them, there are kids that are looking to me in the same way. Because if you think about when you were in middle school and you were in high school and you saw someone that's even in college, you're like, oh my God, you're an adult. Right. You're like a real adult.
Right.
Meanwhile, you get to college and you're like, I do not feel.
I have no idea what I'm doing.
No, absolutely not. So I have to kind of remind myself of that and be like, oh, right, like people see me, the kids that I work with see me as like a legitimate adult. And so, yes, there's pressure that comes with that, but I think that like the joy and the experiences that I get in knowing that I can do something and I can talk to kids in ways that they may not hear it from their teachers or from their parents. So I try to be that kind of stopgap in between.
How about the trend we're seeing in this community, especially in 2021?
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of shootings. There was one, I believe it was yesterday or last night, right off of Cleveland and Jefferson Park Avenue, an area probably you don't really consider for shootings, off the JPA area.
Right.
Open-ended. What do you think's going on here?
I mean, I think that we as like a human species, right, when we're thinking about ways in which we connect with people, ways in which we work together, ways in which we diffuse situations, right? Almost all of that is done in person. Almost all of that is done where there is a communication. You're able to see the humanity in another person. And I think that when you strip away that humanity, when they become just an object, when they become
an avatar.
Right, exactly, right? An avatar. That's when you can start to understand the dehumanization then can lead to violence, right? The same way that black people weren't treated as people, they were treated as slaves, they were treated as property, they were treated as anything but human. That allowed for the dehumanization of something like slavery, right? Same thing with Jewish people, same thing with even women that oftentimes aren't treated like men. I mean, so they're definitely not treated like men, but they're not treated like humans, right? That dehumanization, that creates an opportunity for violence because as a species, like we're not going to harm something that we believe is human or that we believe to be in the same level as us, right? Because that means that we can then be equally harmed. But when you have this idea that there is dehumanization, when you're not able to see another person as equal to you or as the same as you, then you're going to be able to really create some harm and you're going to be able to do something like take their life. I wish that I had an answer. I think there are a lot of great groups, like sit-downs before shootouts, the number you can call.
That's Rob Gray?
Rob Gray,
yeah.
Exactly, a good friend of mine. Buck Squad. Like there are people that are seeing that there's, again, like I said before, where I'm able to talk to my kids and say sometimes the same thing that their parents are telling me, like, hey, so-and-so is just not listening to me. There was a time, actually, I have a little brother named Jaden, and he's about 12 years old.
Your little brother?
My little brother, okay. Yeah. And so he was, this was a couple years ago, but he just started going through puberty. Okay. And I remember we were out a family vacation. Jaden comes running out the bathroom, just took a shower, and he, forgive me, Jaden, smelled. Like, he was like, it was BO everywhere. Yeah. And I was like, Jaden, buddy, like, do you take a shower? He's like, yeah, like I just got out. Do you put on deodorant, Jaden? No, I only put it on a couple of times a week. Jaden, buddy, it's time for every day. It's time for an everyday deodorant.
I remember that. You remember that?
Yeah.
Me too.
I was like, every day?
Yeah.
But like, I told him that, and my mom, like, afterwards came up to me, and Jaden put on deodorant, and talked to me a couple months later, and she was like, he's put on deodorant every day since. I have been trying to get him to put on deodorant forever. right? And so, I mean, it's a trivial example, but it's like when you hear something from someone that you look up to, you hear something from someone that looks like you, your response is going to be different, right? Your interaction with them, your interaction with whether it is in sit-downs before shootouts, you're talking to someone and you're trying to explain, how someone disrespected you or why you feel like this might be the next step. You're able to say, you know what? Actually, like this can be different, right? Like I can find a new way, and so I think that like. I'd love to see more black men in therapy roles. I'd love to see more black men in education, because these are spaces where, especially if kids that we have been systemically taken away, right, from our fathers, whether it is not being able to move into West Haven, like there are families that couldn't bring a father into West Haven because you had to be a single mother, right? If this is after Vinegar Hill. There are a third of black men are incarcerated or will experience incarceration at some point in their lifetime. Like, every day that I walk free throughout the streets, I consider that a blessing because I just don't know, like, when it could happen, right? And so I think that there's so many things that you're carrying with you, and for you to not have kind of what we had mentioned before, some of those experiences of being able to really understand and like go through the therapy that's not really therapy, playing the game of basketball that's more like meditation because you're kind of focused on one thing, the talking to your barber and you're going to go see them every week or every other week and that becomes almost like your therapist, you're updating them on your life, like you're using these alternative methods, but when you take all that away and it's just a screen, like it's hard to see people as humans.
Ahmad Hawkins is watching the show.
Oh, nice.
And he says there's definitely not many of us black men in education. I'm curious, Ahmad Hawkins, I love Ahmad Hawkins, he knows this, why you think that is, sir, as well. If you could share your perspective. Have you personally experienced racism in Charlottesville? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Actually, I remember you had asked this question to Yaz, I think a couple weeks ago.
Yaz Washington.
Yeah, exactly.
You know Yaz?
I do. Yeah. Actually, we used to work together.
Okay.
So I think that like yes, I have, right? I mean, I think there's many different ways that you can understand and categorize racism, whether it's systemic racism, whether it is individual acts of racism, that's part of the experience, right? I think that like I cannot discount my experience or I cannot discount other people's experiences because of however I may feel, right? So I say that to say like, yes, I've experienced racism. Yes, I've seen and been a part of really incredibly traumatic things. There's been a lot, and so I'd say that like there are so many people that I think are in our community, whether it is that they didn't believe racism existed until August 12th, right? There are people that maybe thought that we were past this. But to understand that like there are so many different ways in which racism manifests itself, that to create an opportunity or to create a way of like just kind of working through some of the difficult things. Sorry that I'm like missing my words, but I'm just like thinking about like experiences that I've had, and it's been incredible, and I thank the community that I've been around, and I thank the people that I've worked with, and the people that have been, near me through really rough times. So I'd say that like absolutely exists, absolutely I've experienced it, and I just know that there are so many people who don't get their stories told, and so many people that don't have the opportunity to share like what's happened to them, or even have that experience to be validated.
Do we? Is any of the shootings that we have seen, and there have been, guys, in this first quarter of 2021, perhaps more than most in my 21 years of being in this community, do we think any of that has to do with the movement of removing budget from the police, the defund the police mentality, or do we think it's more attributable to the fact that so much of 2020 and even the first part of 2021 has been time behind screens, time in quarantine, time away from, as you said, human connection, basketball court, barbershop, at the restaurant, at church?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, I think that like this is a couple of things. One, when I'm thinking about defunding the police, I think about like and I think that even Chief Brackney had mentioned this before, it's about like refunding the way that we incorporate policing, right? So my dad was a police officer. Both my dads were Marines. My dad was a police officer once he retired, was working in the Pentagon during 9/11.
So this hits close to home.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like I understand,
Okay.
and I carry that with me every day, right? And I know that actually, I used to always wonder why my dad, the first time whenever we had like our alarm was going off, or if sometimes there was a police that was coming into our neighborhood or whatever, the first thing he grabs is his badge. First thing, every single time. And I used to always wonder like why he did that. And now I'm starting to obviously realize that there's a different understanding when you have another police officer. You don't see, again, it's that humanization, right? It's that, oh, you have the same job that I do. Oh, you put your life on the line, so I can talk to you differently than someone that I may see as a threat. And so I think that like with defunding the police and understanding that it's really about funding social workers, it's really about funding people that if it's a traffic stop and there's no threat or no understanding or no even appearance of a possible threat, there's not a need for a gun, right? There's not a need for you to have weaponry. There's not a need for tanks and all types of different things. Like if you understand that there are people and there are experiences where you're just going through life, right? I like worry about everything that I do inside of my car, driving through Charlottesville, what I look like. Like I have a bright red Prius. It is like very non-threatening. Like I do everything that I can. And I also even keep my dad's badge inside of my car just because I need people to know that like I am your son, right? I am the person, like I want you to see me and see the human in me. And so I think that like if you can eliminate that threat or that perception of fearing for my life every time I see a police officer, or just not knowing what's gonna happen.
And you feel that
every
time you see a police officer?
I mean, honestly, like it's something where I just don't know because there are so many different ways where people can excuse, right, the actions of a police officer, where people can look up things that happened in a person's past and say, well, this person deserved it, or, oh, they weren't really kneeling on George Floyd's neck. He was, it was because he had drugs in his system and that's why he died. Like there are so many different ways in which, again, it's dehumanization over and over and over again. And for us to, again, strive to just be seen as equals, to strive to just be seen as humans, it's really hard to get over that perception. And so, like, for me, it's like, I believe in funding both, whether it is like people that are just doing traffic stops, social workers that are going to domestic violence interactions. Like if there are reasons to feel threatened, if there are legitimate reasons where you do need a gun, which gets to other, laws and thinking about ways about what it means for people to be properly trained in gun safety and things like that. I think that there's value in rethinking the way that policing is, right? There's value in rethinking how we police our community and how we work together. So I don't think that has much to do with like the shootings that have happened. I think that's more contributed to like, honestly, I haven't seen people's faces, right? In so long. I haven't seen someone, and you're one of the first people that I've like seen in obviously like a year, where I'm able to like have a real interaction and a real conversation. And to take all of that, to take every little interaction that you have with people, to see smiling faces or someone nodding to you, or just like going through your day and not wondering if you're going to catch a virus that could kill you or your family, like that's a lot of pressure to have.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's enough being said about how difficult it is to go through that and to go through those experiences of like living that entire time, and to also be reminded very clearly that your life could end at any moment.
Well said. So much personally that I took for granted was the nuanced nature of conversation and body language.
Yeah.
Like so much of conversation and human connection is not just the words we're hearing from each other, but it's like your body language is comfortable.
Yeah.
My body language is comfortable. Feel safe with you. Like I want to open up. I hope you feel the same.
I
and
do.
like when that darn the mask is paramount to getting over this. I'm not knocking the mask. But when the mask is covering half of our face, we lose so much of that nuance in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And then next thing you know, you're not seeing like the mouth and the face and the smile and so much that is important to understanding the other person. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that is, it becomes a barrier, right? It becomes a barrier as far as connection and as far as working with each other. Our office has been working really closely in trying to figure out anti-racist work inside of the workplace, inside of our personal lives, and we've been working really hard at that. And it has been really difficult to do this over Zoom. It's been really difficult to open up and try to share, things, racist things that have happened to us, try to share experiences that we've had where you're not able to really explain exactly what happened or why the feeling was, but you're able to say, like, this just really made me feel uncomfortable, what you said about this person or how you approached me in this way. And like to take that out, to take the experiences that we take for granted. I mean, like it's so hard to think about what ways like we're not connecting to each other. So it's hard to think about like to even getting back into the world, right? And you asked me this before about how I felt leaving the vaccine or getting both my vaccinations. It's like I felt better, and I continue to feel more comfortable as more people are vaccinated and as I'm getting back. But also like I oftentimes, as I find myself, I get exhausted now in ways that I didn't before.
How so?
I mean, I get exhausted in like thinking about, okay, we had a big weekend. It was Easter weekend, right? A lot of my family is vaccinated. We were able to go see each other. But like my throat hurt afterwards. And I was like, oh my gosh, like why is my throat hurting? Thinking COVID, but realizing actually it was because I just didn't talk very much. I haven't been in an extended period of like talking with other people. I noticed myself and my own interaction, my own mannerisms and the way that I am with other people and how I interact a lot more. I noticed that like I'm not as comfortable speaking in front of people as what I did. I mean, like I think that it's something that I don't know. I was so used to always interacting with other people that it's just become so hard to like not to do this now like face to face, right? And even thinking about the How You podcast, it's like we even started that podcast saying, okay, we're ready to interview people over Zoom, but we've actually gotten a lot better than this, better than what we were in March of like connecting over Zoom and trying to have hard conversations over Zoom. And so we can use this tool to record our conversations and then share this with other people who may not see it or who may not have these conversations by themselves.
How about the concept of white privilege? I said this a couple weeks on the show. I don't think, and I'm only speaking for myself here, I don't want to speak for anybody else besides me. I don't think even me personally, I understand the true concept of white privilege. I don't even understand the concept of what I'm able to do, perhaps the loans I was able to get from a home ownership or commercial standpoint, the opportunities someone is willing to give me, the conversations I can have, just go about my life.
Yeah.
When have you seen in your mentoring and your leadership with youth where the concept of that boy, that girl is able to do things differently than perhaps this boy and this girl? And like, I'll equate it to athletics. I remember growing up in a team sport environment. My mom and dad, my brother and I, we had a football, a basketball, a baseball, a soccer ball, and we said, get outside. And very early on, we knew that like, I mean, I'm talking like first or second grade, there was like a pecking order we knew in our head. That kid's really good. That kid is the one I want on my team. When we're picking captains, I'm gonna go with him and her. That person's not that good. So like children really early on are able to decipher things that I think we don't always give them credit for. How have you seen it with mentoring youth, white privilege, and when students say, man, why does this person get this luxury and this person does not?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like it's incredible to see, especially thinking about like teenagers, the way that they understand concepts and things that I literally just found out about, in my 20s. The internet has been such a blessing as far as understanding different ways that people interact with each other, hearing about different stories, seeing the ways that like students can either, be perceived differently, right? So if we're talking about the riots at both in Charlottesville, honestly, and at the Capitol, right? Thinking about how the police presence is so different during those times, right? Where police are able to say, oh, we'll have a couple of, barricades that are up at the Capitol. Sure, we understand there may be some people that are a little bit rowdy, but it'll be okay. They have Blue Lives Matter flags with them. Like, they're our friends, whatever. They break into the Capitol, right? Even coming out of it, there was not a paddy wagon of just people just being like, all right, everyone that committed a federal offense, get into the car, like you're going to jail. They just kind of like, they took pictures and they let people out and they said, we'll find them later, right? To think about that versus times when Black Lives Matter was on the National Mall, during times where people, like, you're seen as so much greater of a threat, right, than other people. And I think that, like, the kids that I work with see that. They see that they are treated differently. My brother Jaden had talked about in one of our documentaries called A Different Side, where he said, like, I remember there was a time when he was in a private school, it was a private Catholic school, and he was the only black kid in the entire school. This is down in Richmond. And he had said, like, there was a time where I was sitting down, eating my lunch, and there were kids that were standing on the tables, throwing food and yelling next to me, right? They were doing this right next to me, and I was sitting there just trying to eat my lunch, go about my day. My teacher goes over, calls me out, and says I was the one that was creating the disturbance in the cafeteria. And he realized that this was when he was in elementary school, right? He realized, like, they are treating me differently. We had gone on a family vacation once where Jaden, he's a really good swimmer. He's, like, incredible at swimming. And Jaden was doing some of his, like, different strokes inside the swimming pool in, like, the resort or whatever. And Jaden had noticed that every time that he got into the pool, all the other kids, somehow their parents had something for them to do. They needed to come out the pool. They had to fix their sunscreen or talk to them or whatever. And Jaden would go, he'd do his laps, whatever. He'd want to play with the kids because Jaden's just like me, really energetic, really wants to work with people. And Jaden, as soon as Jaden got out of the pool, talked to my dad, he then realized that the kids would then get back in the pool. Man. And Jaden looks at my dad and he goes, I bet if I stuck my toe in the water, they'd get right back out. And this kid was 12 years old.
Get out.
And, like, so they are extremely perceptive, and they can understand that there are things that no one said the word race, no one said the word racism. They saw Jaden, a really adept swimmer, right? They saw him swimming in the pool. Somewhere in their mind, they said this is not, whether it is we don't want you to interact with our kids, whether it is the water is dirty now, whether it is like something, right? Something in them said, I don't want my kids interacting with this other kid. And Jaden saw that, right? And then so what do you think that did to the kids, the white kids that were at the swimming pool that were getting taken out every time the black kid got in the pool?
Yeah, it reinforced something that they didn't even know was actually happening, but their parents, their role models are reinforcing and basically teaching it, whether directly or indirectly. Mm-hmm. They're reinforcing it. How did your dad respond to that?
So he said, Jaden, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is something that I wish I could explain it to you, but this is how the world is. Like, there are going to be people that don't like you because of your race and because of how you look. It was a really hard conversation to have with a 12-year-old. Yeah. To again be able to say, like, this is not. How do you explain that, right? How do you say that you've done nothing wrong and yet you're being treated differently?
And how old is he now?
Now he's going to turn 14.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Yeah.
How do we fix that?
Yeah.
And there's no obviously answer, right answer, easy answer is I guess the better term, because it's so systematic. Having the Daniel Fairleys of the world in positions of leadership is obviously going to help.
Yeah.
How about this question? Who do our youth look up to now as like the Michael Jordans? Is the Michael Jordans still the Michael Jordans for our youth? Is it now music? Is it now the Daniel Fairleys? I mean, who do our youth look up to now?
I mean, I wish that I had enough influence to do that.
I'm sure I know you do.
But I would say, honestly, I mean, it's people that are on TikTok, it's people that are
Really?
Instagram influencers, YouTube stars, people that can be famous, because I think...
Does that scare the hell out of you?
I mean, it does. It's because we don't know, as we start to learn more about these people, we don't know who they are. Right? We don't know what their motives are. The idea of Instagram for kids is such a bad idea.
Instagram for kids?
That's what Mark Zuckerberg was talking about when he said that he's going to create an Instagram for kids 13 and under. And
get out. I did not see that.
I hope it's just a bad idea that he's not going to go through with.
And what's he thinking? It's like we can make Instagram for kids a safe spot where we can potentially filter certain content out that they will not see on the adult platform. Is that the thinking?
I think that's what it is. Because obviously anyone can follow anyone, and you know they're not going to be censored. But you can see provocative things on Instagram.
Sure.
And you can be whatever profile. But I think that I guess that's his initial idea, but that's I just don't think that's a good idea. I mean, I wonder. And I'm hoping that, honestly, just as they did after the Spanish flu, right, the Roaring 20s, people are, at least in the beginning, people were having fun. It was exciting times. They were really back in the streets. People are saying that may happen again, right? We have another Roaring 20s of, fun and jubilation and whatever. I'm hoping that this will then honestly help to set us back more towards in-person interaction, right?
As opposed to the screen time.
Right, exactly. I think that people hopefully will be overly saturated with it, where we're like, you know what else can I look at on my phone? There's only so much I can do,
right.
As opposed to stealing those moments in between personal interactions. I'm hoping that this is actually an opportunity where kids can come and they can talk about their own experiences, where we can work together, where they want to be with their friends, where they want to really be in community with other people. That's my hope, is that this is what comes up. This is what comes of the pandemic, is that we can really just create more opportunities for kids to connect.
We have a ton of comments coming in, guys. We're live on literally every platform possible. Kelly Chambers, is it Jila ID? Giving you props. Ike Edwards III, Wendy Amar, Welford McLean Jr., Chris Campbell, Junior Pena, Geronda Hill, and I apologize if I've messed up anyone's names, guys. Troy Robinson said, I bought a white Subaru for the exact same reason that you did, Daniel. Ahmad Hawkins says, never had anyone that looked like me encourage me to become an educator. Mm-hmm. As Daniel stated, we respect and hang on to the words of those who we respect and look like us. Yeah. James Watson, thank you for your service, Daniel Fairley. Troy Robinson, we fix it with the people that created it. Well said right there, Troy Robinson. Got 6 states watching you here on the show. How about screen time with an impressionable minds? Mm-hmm. My wife and I, we have a 3-year-old, and sometimes just from a sanity standpoint, we're like, put Blimpie on,
Yeah.
It's YouTube.
Right.
Or it's like, she's trying to make dinner, and we don't want our 3-year-old next to the stove. Let's put something on screen.
Right.
And I've seen, even with the differences of having the iPhone versus the television, the impact it can have on my kid. Mm-hmm. Like when he has it this close to his face and he can hold it in his hands, and this kid is at 1 was flipping through YouTube videos and playing different ones. And when it's this close to him, dude is mesmerized on the phone, hypnotic, I'm talking. But if it's PBS on the TV, it's not nearly as mesmerizing or hypnotic for him.
Wow.
The screen time we utilize to frankly, to get a breath, especially my wife who's a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
How have you seen screen interaction impact elementary and middle school youth from, we've covered the positives, okay, from a developmental standpoint?
Yeah.
A lot to unpack with that one.
It is. I mean, because I'd like to say that there are, obviously, there are things that they can learn, interacting with screens at such a young age that's going to teach them, so that way when they're, your age, they're going to be flying cars,
Right.
There'll be things we can't even think
You're
of.
going to be like 5x where we're at, 10x,
Right.
100x.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's obviously what can happen if kids are exposed so early. But I also think that there's so many ways, again, in which you're taking that experience, right? And you're saying this is reality, right? This is what the world is. You can interact with anything just in the palm of your hand. And so you don't have things such as walking around, a meditation, there are experiences that kids are missing out on, that I think because we're viewing it through different lenses. We're viewing it through the lens of, is this a good Instagram photo? Is this something that I can capitalize on or potentially become famous by? That's what a lot of the kids are using the platforms. That's why a lot of them have public profiles, because even though they may be underage, they're still well, so-and-so was just on Ellen and I could be the next so-and-so. I could make up a TikTok dance. I could get me, famous in some way.
How about the likes? Yeah. The craving of likes and hearts.
I mean, I think about in the way that I had mentioned all the accomplishments that I had, right? Those weren't likes on Instagram, but it was still there's a pride that comes with that, right? There's a pride in saying, I was able to do something that this wide variety of people enjoyed. And again, public profiles get you more likes. If you're able to do something that's salacious in some way, it's something that I see a lot of kids that they're starting to really, instead of taking things and being able to say, what's the value in this, whether it is, am I going to learn something? Am I going to have more fun with my friends or whatever? It's how many likes can I get? How many shares on Instagram? How many times can people view this? And then how quickly can I go viral? Right? I think that those are becoming the ways that we're interacting, and I think that that's part of the reason why I had done the podcast through YouTube as opposed to I had tried thinking about doing a podcast just through audio, and it's that may work for me because I have stuff to do around the house. I'll go and I'll watch, I'll wash clothes or whatever, do some grass, and I'll listen to things on a podcast. But for kids, it's more again, they're swiping through, they're trying to figure out, okay, what's next? And I mean, even our videos being 20 minutes long, people were saying, I know kids that were oh my gosh, this is, where's 5 minutes? Where's 2 minutes, right? I think that there's so many times where our attention
the
span.
ADHD creation of screen time?
I mean, I think it's the idea that our attention spans are just so short that we don't want to sit through, even things that are, I find it in myself, right? Even things that I'm watching YouTube videos on cars or whatever, and
Sure.
I'm 1.5 speed, kick it up. I get what you're saying and I can hear it and just get to the point,
Yeah.
right? And so imagine that someone that's grown up, always being able to adjust the speed on things, always being able to, right?
Sad.
Yeah, think about ways in which they can just get the most amount of information as fast as possible. That's gonna change the way that they sit through an entire movie, sit through a lecture inside of a
Church service.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, our church, they say it's because of COVID, but we went into church yesterday and it was only an hour with worship and everything and just kind of shortening the experiences. And it kind of, even if you're thinking about delayed gratification, right? I think that honestly part of the reason why when I would we have a prayer before we ate was this idea of you can have this thing that's right here, right now in front of your face. You can delay gratification just for a minute, 5 minutes, whatever. Hold on, take a breath, right? Thank God for whatever you have and then eat. Right? The idea of just minimizing and going to instant gratification, being able to say, I can get this right now, right? That's what's really changing. That's what's really changing our mindsets into how we interact and how we work and even understand the benefits of a longer conversation with someone.
Well, I'll tell you what, this conversation is nearly 90 minutes, and I've enjoyed every aspect of this conversation. 1:47, I'm mindful of your time here. I'm going to ask you one last question, and the question is, Daniel Fairley, do you have hope for the next generation, and if so, why? And after that, I'd like to get some more information about your podcast out to everybody, about the 100 Black Men of Central Virginia, which you're the president of, and anything else that we're not covering. So the question for you, sir, is your, I guess, state of the union for the next generation.
Honestly, they are some of the most incredible bright-minded people I have ever met. I mean, they are people that really are able to understand and dissect and pick apart arguments in ways that I've never seen before. And I think that we do have the internet to thank for a lot of that, right? We do have people that are able to share positive videos and we're able to share positive content. I know that there's a lot that could go wrong, right? I know there's a lot of things where people are using misinformation and using fake news and using different ways to like really torque reality and change the way that people perceive things. But the kids that I work with and the ways that I see them interacting and to see the globalist perspective that they have, to see their understandings of humans and really like being able to connect with people in ways that I couldn't imagine when I was their age, I see good things coming. I see them in ways that oftentimes are misunderstood, in ways that they may not, give you exactly what you want. But like, they also are realizing they don't owe you anything, right? And I think that's so powerful to be able to say like, you're a student and you don't have to respect someone just because they said respect me, right? You don't have to take the status quo as just what it is. Just say, okay, well, gay people can't get married. Oh, well, that's it, right? They're saying, no, there's more, right? Oh, trans women can't play these certain sports. No, we're not accepting that anymore, right? They're saying that like, we can do better, right? And I think that that's what honestly the idea of being American, the idea of loving your country is being able to challenge it and say, we can do better. I know we can do better than this. And that is what I see our youth doing every single day, is pushing us to be the America that we dreamed we could be, pushing us to live out our ideals in the way that we promised them when they were growing up.
Dude, that was fire right there. Okay, that was so good. All right, Judah. For the folks that want them 1 minute or 90-second clip, can we cut that into a highlight clip right there? My question to Daniel and his answer, because that right there was fire. You are getting so much props on the feed right now. All right, the show is yours. The podcast, where we can find it, where we can engage with it. Hunter Blackman of Central Virginia, which means a lot. Anything else that needs to be in the news cycle, sir? Yeah,
I mean, honestly, like the podcast, it's if you go to YouTube, type in BMA Seville, that's Black Male Achievement Seville, and basically that will get you right to our page. That we have about 4 episodes out right now. We're gonna have a 5th one coming out. It's like an Ask Me Anything episode, but we've had interviews with Dr. Cameron Webb, Mac McClellan, Chef Antoine Brinson.
Heavy hitters.
Yeah, exactly. Like lots of really great people. Will Jones, talking about Prolific Run Crew. Like there's so many people that are doing great things in our community, and we've been able to really use that and share their message, and also talk about like, we know that you're doing these great things, right? We know that Antoine, you left Common House and said, I'm just gonna create something. I'm gonna create something that no one's ever seen before, and I'm gonna do it by myself. And he did, right? He worked every single day, and it's like, how do you do that? And now he has 3 kids.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Like he's a husband, he's like a father, he's a mentor, like he's all these different things. And it's like, what's the mental toll that comes with that, right? Talking to Cameron Webb and saying, how do you run a campaign with someone that's, telling lies about you? There's disinformation going on. Like, how do you do it?
In a gerrymandered district.
Exactly, right? I mean, a district that's larger than the state of New Jersey.
Right.
It's absolutely insane.
That was set up for him not to win, and he still went and chose to do it.
Yeah.
Which is props to him.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. So I think that like there's a story behind that, right? There's a story behind what is it, like what kind of person does it take to be that one that says, I'm gonna take this leap anyways. I know the odds are against me. I know they're gonna throw everything at me, but I'm gonna do it anyways.
Okay, see, you get me thinking. I promise you one more question, but you got me thinking here. What are the common characteristics you're seeing of the folks that you're interviewing that are like willing to like, I mean, you talk about Chef Brinson and Dr. Webb. I mean, these guys are going against like serious odds.
Yeah.
And putting in like serious time, despite the fact that the tea leaves would say this probably ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
What are the common characteristics?
Honestly, it's determination, it's resilience, it's having a village of people around them, right? A village of people that says, even if this doesn't work, right? Even if you don't do what you may set out to do, like your presence matters. Your just like the ability to be a person that is running for this district, as a black person running for this district, to potentially be the first doctor, right? To be inside of the House of Representatives, like you have a powerful presence, and that matters to the kids that are running after you, right? Dr. Webb inspires me to then run for something, right? To then run a campaign and to be like him and to say, you know what, even if I don't win, there are ways in which I can inspire, there are ways in which I can work towards the equity that we say that we want. Like, I think that the idea of being that person and being the one to say, you know what, I'm gonna do it anyways. I'm gonna do it because I know that this is bigger than me. This is bigger than any type of dreams that I may have for myself. This is about community. This is about the next generation. This is about more than I could ever dream or realize. And so that's why I think that's so powerful in being black men and being people and being able to say, like, I'm going to get my doctorate, right? Not just because of me, not because of I believe that I can get my doctorate. I know I can get my doctorate. That's not what it's about. It's about kids seeing me and saying, that guy has a doctorate? Whoa, that means I could have a doctorate. That means that I could do something that I may not have thought that I could before. And I think that like that's what they see in themselves, and that's what they see in the work that they're doing.
You are such a baller. You are such a baller. Judah, is this guy not a baller here? Judah's nodding his head. This is a fantastic interview.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Thank you.
Anytime you ever want to come on, anytime you suggest someone that would be great in this kind of long form setting, they will be on in a heartbeat.
Awesome.
I mean, you are absolutely fantastic. We will send you all this after the show. I want to say thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Honestly, I mean, it was incredible just to be here and to share with your audience kind of some of my thoughts and things that I've been thinking about and wanting to really again start to engage right back with the public and engage with the work that I'm doing.
Don't you miss this?
I do. Man,
right?
I miss it. Yeah, it's really it's something that we took advantage of, right? We took it for granted. And we said, oh, yeah, you know, I said this before. We met almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll be on the show. Oh, whatever. I'll figure it out sometime later. And just to realize how important human connection is and how important sharing stories can be really just to, honestly, the advancement.
Like, after doing this with someone like as inspiring as you, I almost feel like this, like this natural high for life. Like, you know, it's like this, like, you feel like the adrenaline and like the zest, and you just like want to go out there and just like do something. I mean, I swear, I'm just like ready to go right now. And that's what, guys, human connection is all about. And to his phrase, we took it for granted for so long, and after 14 months, we're craving it.
Yeah.
We're craving it. Thank you for coming on this show.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely our pleasure. Gentlemen and ladies, his name is Daniel Fairley. I think this is just the beginning of some serious greatness from this man. Hopefully within this community, because we are so lucky to have him, as so many are saying right here on the feed. Guys, this is the I Love CVille show, where we try to showcase the best of Charlottesville, Virginia each day in an approachable fashion, and we're very grateful for you joining us today. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Daniel, dude, you killed it. We just went, it is 1:56.
Oh my God.
I know, I thought it was going to be a 20-minute interview. The first time I looked at the clock, it was 1:41.
Wow.